Well, good morning and welcome everybody to the Sales and Marketing Director Incubator, the program that helps you make great career decisions to maximize your potential. My name is Mike Dixon, Director of the Sales, Marketing and Category Practice for AXR Recruitment and Search. In each episode this year, we're focusing on a theme. In our last session, we talked with Jeff McKenzie, Commercial Director of Pernod Ricard, about organizational and talent development. And today we're going to talk about the move from corporate to consulting. And gather some really interesting insights from someone who successfully made that shift. So a big welcome to Andrew Sutherland, Managing Director of Lightswitch Consulting. Andrew, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Thanks, Mike.
Well, fantastic to have you on. And we're going to have fun exploring your career and getting those insights as we go. But briefly, guys, Andrew's career has seen him work with some of the biggest names in CPG in his native New Zealand. The UK, where I first encountered Andrew many years ago, and like me, he's now kind of naturalized Australian. But before we get into his career and those insights in more detail, let's get to know him a little bit better. And as a reminder, guys, there's a chat facility so those on the live call today. Unfortunately, you can't chat to me on the podcast, but on the live call, ask any questions you go. More than welcome to do that, and I'll do my best to answer them as we run the session. So as we do in every session this year, we're going to ask a couple of similar questions because I'm just interested in everyone's view. But we'll kick off with Andrew. What's your favorite brand? And you can't pick a brand that you've worked on.
Very cool. Look, there's a brand I really admire. It's a Kiwi brand called Triumph and Disaster, and it's a men's healthcare brand. And they've been going for about 10 years. It was a bit of a backyard startup. And there's a couple of things I like about that brand. I like the fact that they've got a really broad positioning. So they've started off with a heritage of sort of men's style and what it was like to, sort of look after yourself as a man years and years and years ago. But then they brought that into a very modern context where they're using botanicals and they're using sort of raw ingredients from New Zealand and increasingly around the world to sort of build this product range. So I really like the way that they've done that. I like their positioning. Like the name itself speaks to the stark reality that if you're going to do something, it's either going to work or it's not. And I see that as a little bit of a, that's almost like a daily motto. You get up and you make a decision as to whether or not it's going to be a great day or not. And you can, you go out there and you give it your best shot and it either works or it doesn't, but tomorrow's another day. And there's a fun in that. There's a real sort of sense of adventure and a little bit of mischief and a little bit of resignation, and it's part of fate, but it's also about having a go and just keeping, having some fun and really having a good time. And they bring that ethos through all of their brand. I also like it because they've grown the brand internationally. They're now in Australia, the UK, and the US. They work with a number of international sports teams, but they're not in retail. It's all just been direct to consumer. And I really admire anyone who can build what is essentially a retail product for 10 years without being in a retail channel. And I haven't spoken to them, but I suspect that they're building something that's going to be really, really strong. And at some stage, it will go into retail distribution, and then it will be a very, very strong, compelling brand.
It's a very powerful name, isn't it? I like that. Well, one to look out for. That's great.
Yes.
Now, I mentioned you're was originally from New Zealand. I'm from Scotland. We, whilst both of us now Australians and living here a long time, we have I think a view on an interesting view when you're kind of new to a country. In many respects, you're not growing up here. But I love your take on given we're about to enter into the federal elections. Now we've got a couple of different realistic choices. I'm not a massive fan of either personally, without giving away too much of my politics. But if you could pick anybody, from today or even history, to be the next Prime Minister of Australia, who would you pick?
Look, I think if you cast your mind back to 2018, I think Julie Bishop would have been a really good PM. I think she would have done a great job. She's born in Lobethal in SA. She grew up, her parents were orchardists. And I think she tells this story about, they were shipping apples to the UK and it went through it went through the Middle East and it got stuck in a trade embargo, and there was a couple of containers of apples that sat there for 9 months or something and rotted, and there was nothing her family could do. And I think at that stage she decided she wanted to do something else apart from grow food. And I think there's plenty of food producers in Australia who can empathise with that particular challenge of exporting. But I like the fact that, as a woman in politics, which is predominantly a male-dominated sport, and has been for so many years, she was the first deputy leader. She was the first foreign affairs minister. She's now the chancellor of the Australian National University. She's the first female chancellor. I think she was really a groundbreaker in a lot of different ways. And I think Australia needs a woman leader at the moment. There's a deep sense of anxiety in all of our communities, and we need change, but the change needs to be empathetic. And I think, that it's really time for some good, strong female leadership for this country.
I like Julie Bush. I think disappointing how she left politics. Probably says a lot about our politics that she did leave politics. But very good point. When you see Albo and ScoMo thrashing it out, you just look for something different. That's I don't think that's our future. But anyway, we'll move on, because this is not a political podcast. This is about careers and insights. So let's get into that. So I mentioned before, you worked at some of the biggest CPG firms. You started at Kellogg's. You moved to the UK and got into Kraft, which I may have had something to do with. You worked at some sort of slightly left field business, the Royal Automobile Club, the Kodak. Then you went back into Reckitt, PepsiCo. You ran a franchise business. You had GM roles with Better Drinks and Diolio. This is across New Zealand, the UK, and Australia. So it's a really interesting career. I love that diversity, Andrew. When you look at that, how much of that was kind of a planned kind of pathway that you took, and how much of it was you just reacting to opportunity?
Look, I'd say probably the first 10 years or so was pretty much reacting to opportunity. The next 10 years or so was much more planned. The first job I got was working as Kellogg's as a sales rep, and I was just super happy to have a job with a car. And I didn't even have a phone; I had a pager back in those days, back in the 90s. Something on your belt would go up, and I better go and call someone. Someone's. But that was a major step. And that was great. And the guys at Kellogg's at that time were fantastic. We were in a great position. I learned so much in that business. The next move was UK, which, as you say, you had something to do with. And that was coming off the back of the old OE, where, you'd sell everything, bugger off to Europe, buy a combi van, drive around for 6 months, drink more than you should do. And then I got back to the UK and just decided to stay. I just wanted to live in a different culture. I was curious about what it would be like to live overseas. So ended up getting a job at Kraft. Thank you very much, Mike Dixon, for sorting that one out. Moved out to Cheltenham and was there for 4 or 5 years. Then after that, when we moved back to Australia, that's when I really started to sort of get a little bit more mindful about my career and start to think a little bit more about the experiences that I needed to gather.
Right. Okay. And when you kind of reflect back, is there a time when you thought that's the time in my career that I enjoyed the most, I had the most fun?
Yeah, look, the years at Kraft were a lot of fun. We were in a small town, 3-4 hours out from London. It was a reasonably transient workforce. There was a lot of sort of mid-20-year-old people there, and half of them used to go somewhere else for the weekend. So we were all sort of there for the week and then away for the weekend. But it was a great time, and we worked really hard. The work was intellectually rigorous, which was good. The culture probably could have been a bit sharper, but that was a lot of fun. Living out of London, doing a lot of sport, working with a really good, smart bunch of people on some good customers and pulling off some great projects with some great brands. That was good.
Yeah, good. And that career that you've had thus far is diverse, and we're talking to you today as a consultant, and a lot of what we'll talk about today is that move and that mindset, and your perspective and how that's changed. But when you look at the move to consulting, how did it take place for you?
So it took place, first of all, in New Zealand, actually, after I moved from a national business manager role at PepsiCo, working at Bluebird, looking after Progressive, into buying and owning my own childcare business for a couple of years, which was a really big change. Following that, I came back into consulting. I started the consulting business and started consulting, and that led to a full-time role with Asahi or Schweppes, working on one of the businesses that they just acquired, which was a lot of fun. And that in turn sort of led us back to Australia. So then there was a couple of full-time jobs following that when we got back here. And then at the end of 2019, the business that we were at was changing, and I just decided that it was time to go and do my own thing at the end of that. And I think part of what led me to it was that I became frustrated with what I see is a slightly risky position when you're in a senior leadership role within an international company. You're on really good money and you've got a really challenging job, and there's a lot of people working for you and dependent on you. But really, your job security is dependent on what not only what you deliver, but also what one or two people think of you. And that's risky when you've got a mortgage and a family and you've got a team in charge, that you need to look at. If there's some guy overseas making a decision about what he thinks you're doing, whether that's right or not, you've got that's risky for you. So I decided I didn't want to live in that environment anymore. And I also decided that I actually wanted to use my powers for good and try and help local businesses just deal with retail a little bit better. And part of the last gig we did with Diolio, we launched organic olive oil into the Australian market via the Bertolli brand. And there hadn't really been a strong supply of it up till then. And as part of that, we started working with the Australian Organic Association. And I met so many fantastic people in that business who were really, really passionate about what they did and what they grew. And, organic's not easy. You need to really go over some big hurdles in order to be an authenticated organic producer and really be committed to it. You need to do it for 3 years just to get the certification. And I was blown away by their passion and their commitment and their real desire to make really, really good food. And I thought, I can help here. I can really help these people deal better with retailers and help them get better commercial outcomes and help them grow their business. And that seemed like a really worthwhile thing to do.
Great. I empathize with your view there, and on controlling your own destiny and being accountable for your own success and failure. Maybe it comes back to that New Zealand brand a little bit, but you mentioned at the start. But I spent most of my life in corporate as well before. I'm running my own business with the guys at AXR, and for me, it was no matter how good you are, ultimately your success is judged by one or two others, and who have who may have a view that isn't quite right. You're like, wow, okay, this is quite tough, and now I'm out of corporate, I must admit. For me, the time is right, and I'm loving it. But so let's talk. Give me your elevator pitch. So for those who don't know, Lightswitch Consulting, it's a reasonably new business, I guess. But without giving away too much, give me the kind of that quick elevator pitch on what you do.
Okay, we help. We work with local and international brands who want to build better, sustainable businesses. And by sustainable, I don't necessarily mean, reducing use of plastic or being organic. I actually mean creating sustainable commercial business models that deliver consistent profit and are driven through really, really strong brand equity positions. It's building those positions takes time. I've worked in a lot of businesses where you just keep pulling the sales lever and you just keep flogging the promotions, and you're trying to get another 2 or 3% every year and try and, get it through 1.5% price increase and scratching to make the P&L. That's a difficult position to be in. But there's a lot of other businesses out there who have really strong brands with massive, massive consumer appeal, but they don't have any of the structure or the process or the thinking that will enable them to grow, and they're a little bit hindered. So what we do is we help them do retail. We bring our experience across retail, and that covers sales, category, marketing, logistics, supply, finance. We bring it and we do a bit of an evaluation of where the business is at. We look at it from a strategic perspective and a cultural perspective, and then we say, well, look, if depending on what your goals are and where you want to get to, this is the pathway that we suggest that you follow. And then we just give people the help that they need and the quantity that they need it at when they need it to enable them to achieve what they want to do.
Great. I want to get into some of that as well in terms of the things that you find common. But before we do, what makes a successful consultant? Because when I look at the career paths of some individuals, they jump into consulting as a stopgap with sometimes that much thought. And it's kind of seen as I'm a consultant until I can find another job. And I don't think that's sustainable. It's not really perhaps setting out with success in mind. Others who get into it, they enjoy it, but they find the balance perhaps between delivery and developing new business quite tough, particularly if they're on their own. But from someone who's doing it successfully, and for others who are either going to listen to this in the podcast or on a live call today, are thinking, I wouldn't mind. I think I could be a consultant. I quite like the idea of it. But what makes a consultant successful?
Okay. So look, I think the first thing that makes someone successful is you've got to be a little bit unhappy with what you're doing now. You need, if you're in a major multinat or you're working in a privately owned firm, you have to be looking at it and you sort of have to say, well, is this it? Surely there's more to this work and career than what I've currently got. So you need a level of dissatisfaction. You need to be searching for something a little bit different. The second thing you need is a bit of bravery, because when you walk away from that monthly bank deposit, it's a bit frightening, to be honest, right? So you need to be a little bit brave, and you need to sort of trust yourself. And there's a really interesting journey there, because when you work for big companies, their brand becomes part of your personal brand, especially when you're younger, in your 20s. People say, what do? You say, oh, I'm a national account manager for Kraft Foods in the UK. And they go, oh, that's a big company. You must be pretty smart. And then when you walk away from those big companies, you don't have that brand association anymore. And your own personal brand sort of takes a little bit of a knock. So you've got to be brave in sort of terms of trusting yourself and knowing that what you do and how you help and what you bring to people is actually helpful. And that's a really big move. The third thing I'd say is you've got to be patient. You can't force consulting. It's not something that you can, drop at half price and sell twice as much of. Well, you probably could, but it's
Any of my clients on today's call, don't think you can do that with my rates, please.
That's right. Just to be clear, we don't do that. You've got to be a little bit patient, and you've got to trust that what you talk to people about makes sense, that you actually know your stuff, and that when you have a conversation with people and you're genuinely curious about what they do and you genuinely want to help them, that generally turns into work. But to be honest, the work needs to come first. If you're doing it for the money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You need to have another reason to go and be a consultant, apart from just trying to earn some cash.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You take away that monthly deposit, as you call it. I think it's a big step, but incredibly rewarding. And flipping it to the other side, when you look at, you've obviously been a business leader, Andrew. You've been a consultant, but a lot of people who are not leading businesses, or perhaps in more mid-career roles, they might deal with consultants from time to time because a consultant happens to be in the business, asking them questions and they're attending meetings, but they sometimes miss the reason, or ask the question, why have we got consultants in? Are we not good enough? What's going on here? Is there an overarching reason, or is there a myriad of reasons why businesses employ consultants?
I think the real value that consultants has is a different experience. Everybody is a sum of their own experiences, and you view the world through a set of lenses that is created for you by the experiences that you've had. Now, depending on where you've been and what you've done, your experiences and the experiences of your colleagues around you might not be what's needed to face the challenge that you've got next. So where consultants really add value is by is the breadth of experience and the variety of different viewpoints that we can bring to thinking. You know, with my team at Lightswitch, we've got 6 people. We've got over 150 years of grocery experience across ANZ and the UK, across food and beverage. You know, sometimes we joke that, you know, oh, look, here's something new, fantastic. We haven't seen this before. Digital marketing is awesome. It's like unpacking this box going, this is sort of what we knew, but it's got different labels on it. It works a different way. This is fun. Let's play with this. But, you know, we generally, if people have got an issue, we can generally figure out a way to fix it because we've got that breadth of experience and we can bring a perspective, or we've seen something happen that we know will work. And that's where I think consultants really add value.
Yeah, yeah. So for those who are worried, perhaps as a consulting firm in because they're not doing a good enough role, it's not necessarily that. It's a different perspective. It's kind of challenging the thought process, but also, I guess, I imagine there's a point you said before around sustainability. There's that as well, because there's no point in going in and fixing a problem, then the problem just resurfaces 6 months later or a year later. So you must be thinking, how do we solve this problem in a sustainable way?
Yeah, this is it. And quite often, I think when you start with a business, you get called in for a very specific problem. It's a sales problem or a marketing issue, or there's a red flashing light somewhere that someone needs to fix right now, and they don't have the resource or the experience to be able to do it. So you get called in. But what you quite often uncover is that the real crux of the issue is either a lack of strategy or a lack of the right culture. And the other role a consultant can play is you can be brutally honest. I think I remember listening to the incubator session you did with Esme, and she was saying that they had a new competitor threat at Kellogg's, and they called in some consultants to do some board gaming. And you know, consultants have the beauty of not being in your culture. They can come in cold and they can look at it in a very, very dispassionate light, and they can be very, very brutally honest about what's working and what's not. But without the ownership necessarily of being part of that team and making those suggestions and being seen, you know, sometimes as being negative by offering criticism of what the team's actually doing. So we can play a good role in that way too. Okay.
So you work with a range of clients and also thinking about your corporate career as well. If you were to sort of look at perhaps the top 3 common things a business needs to focus on, and there's probably a lot in this, but let's just unpick them one by one. What would they be?
I think the first thing is you've got to be closer to your consumers. Businesses live and die on their brands, which is strange for a sales guy to say, but you know, it all starts and ends with the consumer. In Australia, we've got a huge amount of retail concentration. There's 4 retailers that control 90%, 95% of the route to market across ANZ. So there's, you know, 11.5 million households that buy their groceries from Woolies, Coles, Aldi, or Foodstuffs. And if you're facing that as a sales team, you've literally got, you know, if you're in one category, you might have 4 buyers aged between 26 and 35 who will decide whether or not your product actually reaches these households and gets onto these shelves. So that means that a lot of ANZ businesses tend to be very, very customer focused. And by customers, I mean retailers. You know, they are really the gateway to your consumers. But actually, your consumers are the people who make the decision whether or not they want your brand. And I think businesses really, really need to focus on what consumer needs are and how brands meet them better. Needs evolve over time. You've got to stay close to what people want. You've got to really, really learn closely about how they use your product and why they use it. What's the occasion? What's the motivation? What does it deliver for them? Where are they going with it? And deliver innovation against that in order to stay relevant.
Yeah. And and what part does culture play in this? Because I imagine as well, you know, there's often that phrase, isn't it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So okay. As a consultant, when you're going in and looking at strategy, are you conscious of culture as well, and the feel of a business and how leaders are connecting their people to that strategy? Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's culture is the foundation for a lot of the businesses I work on. The reason we call the business Lightswitch is because we believe that every business has an energy in it, it's like a house having energy through the walls, right? And where you actually direct that energy and how you use it is really, really critical to how your business drives and goes. So culture is the energy that the business runs on, essentially. Strategy is the road it follows, but culture is the gas that drives the car that gets it down the road, if you like. And every culture is unique. Every culture supports its own brands. And the challenge with culture is it needs to be enduring. It's bigger than just one individual or one CEO or one sales director. But the challenge is a lot of businesses don't really work to define their culture. You talk to people and you say, what's your just cause? Why are you really here? What is it that you get out of bed to do every day? 9 out of 10 people can't tell you. It's there, they know it. And if you sit and talk to them for half an hour, it becomes clear. But it's not a conversation within the organization. And I think it creates it creates a vacuum. There's this old saying that, people join companies and leave managers. And I think what that actually translates to is a break between a company's ethics and an employee's ethics. You join a company because you like what they stand for. You get in there and you realize actually you don't really like the people. Their ethics are not your people. And then you leave. And this is where culture needs to be at the forefront of the conversation. You need to understand when you join an organization, what do the people actually stand for? What do they believe in? What do they do? What do they walk away from? What do they stand for? What do they stand against? At what point do they draw the line and say, actually, no, we won't do this? That's the questions that people need to ask when they join companies, not about the brands, not about what your market share is, how fast you're selling. That sort of stuff can change, within 6 months. It's the continuum, and the thing which makes a company strong is culture.
Yeah. It's as a recruiter, every day I obviously talk to people who are thinking of leaving or thinking of joining another business, and the fixation on the role is overwhelming for some. What am I going to be doing, and what am I going to get paid, and these are not anywhere near as important as the ability to understand the values of a business, the style in terms of how that translates to leadership perspective, how you will connect, and therefore how much engagement you'll derive from that. And that will determine how successful you be and how long you probably stay. The other stuff is really logical, which is around, is this role going to broaden my path? Is it going to give me a new skill set? Is it going to take me further in my career? But actually, if you're not looking at that in parallel, and at least as importantly around culture, then your decisions can be quite narrow. So I wholeheartedly agree. Now, if I look at your career and you're obviously a successful consultant now, do you think of your career anymore? Do you think about what will I do next, or are you a business owner thinking about how I'll develop the business now? How's your mindset shifted?
Absolutely, yeah, I definitely do. So with Lightswitch, we have the culture that we have is deeply supportive of entrepreneurs. We believe in being brave and taking that jump, but we also believe that you need to be focused on the community. So we try and make sure that we're involved in the community either separately or as a team. And we also believe that you need to grow. So there's an element of self-growth that I think we want most of the team to be responsible for. And I think this comes back to the roles that you have in life. Covey, for those of us old enough to remember Stephen Covey when he was trendy, he used to talk about the roles that you play in life, and you have different sort of roles, that you go through. And when you're in 20s, you may be, you're obviously a son or a daughter. So you have parents and you've got friends and you might have work colleagues, and, you've got sort of those 3 or 4 different roles around you. As you get older, you expand those roles, you become a parent, you maybe get more involved in a community, and those sort of roles expand and grow. But I think what's important is that you get some balance between all of the roles that you have in your life and your work role. Sometimes your work role can be overwhelming, and you need those other roles to be strong so that it keeps the balance there, and they give you energy and ability to be able to drive that work role effectively. So yes, I think there's definitely career opportunities as a consultant. There's no breadth of challenge, or there's no lack of challenge across different businesses that you work with. You know, you can work with all sorts of different size organizations, and quite often the smaller ones are actually the most challenging because they don't have resources, and you need to be really, really sharp with how you actually grow and how you do it in the right order. The beauty of consultancy is that you can really take it where you want to take it. If there's something that you're interested in, you can jump after it and go after it. And that's why we also encourage the team to get involved in personal development and also community development, because eventually all three of them sort of come together in an apex, and they just all support each other.
I want to talk about your insights and advice on career planning in a second, but interesting question in from the chat from David Brent. Who'd have thought he was in the call, but there we are. And this is, I think David is going to test you a bit of a consultant's question, this one, Andrew. If the shopper ultimately decides on the success or failure of a brand or product, how do businesses best navigate the current environment of cost and price increase, where the two major retailers' default position is to reject or expect deal backs?
So I think the best brand you can have is one that doesn't need promotion. It's one that people just walk into the shop every day and they buy. And I think that nurturing and protection of brands is really important. The two biggest assets in a business aren't on the P&L. It's brand loyalty and the strength of the culture of the team. And both of those two things will get you to the point where shoppers choose your brands more often than not. The challenge is how do you develop a strategy that enables that to happen? And then secondly, how do you explain that to the retailer? Something we quite often find is that the conversation with the retailer tends to be dictated by the retailer. It's on the retailer's terms. And there's actually a lot more going on in most organizations that does affect the brand and makes it appealing to the shopper that the retailer never gets to see. So it's about creating a really clear offer for the retailer that's a little bit wider than the current negotiation. You've also got to be really clear about what you won't do. Where's your walk away? And I see so many negotiations without a walk away position. You know, people say, right, we're going to pitch a price increase. We're going to put in 2%. Okay, what if the retailer tells us we can't have any? What are we going to do then? Oh, we'll just have to get whatever we can take. Well, where's your walk away then? Where's your leverage? Where's your negotiation? What's going to happen if the retailer says no, and how's that going to affect the retailer's business? This is sort of fundamental negotiation skills, and I think in some way a lot of it's been lost due to the size of the trade over here and the strength that they have. But if you've got a strong brand, you've got a good negotiation position, and people need to work that out a bit more, I think.
Okay, great. Another couple of questions come in. I'll jump to as well. So from Daniel Roberts, Andrew, your style and wisdom is super strong. It's very nice to hear. You've talked to moving your role and daily work to link with what is important to your passion. When is this the case? When this is the case, it can be a never-ending amount of time invested in the business, which I understand. What do you do to create downtime and recharge your batteries?
Good question. Thank you. One of the beauties of being a consultant is that you're flexible, which is helpful. So that automatically takes some of the stress away from sort of managing and juggling family life. I like to get outside. Pretty much anything that involves water or snow is generally a good fix for me. Mountain biking, running, water skiing, snow skiing, diving, snorkeling, that sort of activity. Love it. And just there's something lovely about being underwater. Can't hear your phone ring. All you can do is hear the fish talking. It's lovely and quiet. It's peace for as long as your air tank lasts. It's awesome. Love it. Yeah. Same feeling on the top of a mountain. You know, you just feel really connected with nature. So that's how I detox.
They're all quite fully absorbing activities, aren't they? So that you get that zen-like state of your mind's completely in the activity. and nothing else goes on. That's why I trail run, for exactly the same reasons. Because if you don't, you're going to fall over if you don't concentrate. So
yes,
cool.
And it's amazing. It's quite surprising how often when you're sitting there at the bottom of the ocean that you get the answer to that question you've been thinking about for 2 weeks and it just pops in your head. It's fantastic.
Because your mind is so clear. Yeah,
yes.
I completely agree. And the most surprising times. One more question from the chat and I'll get back into my questions, but from Graham Fairbairn. Thanks for the time today, Andrew. Keen to hear how you define your own product proposition as a consultant to your own consumers. So how do you differentiate Lightswitch from all the other consulting firms out there?
That's a good point. We're still working on that, to be quite honest with you.
Don't ask tough questions, Graham.
I started a couple of years ago with a very clear proposition that I wanted to help local brands and build a better food industry. The food industry's got a massive challenge ahead of it in the next 10 years. You know, we need to produce twice as much food with half as much resources to feed 10 million people in the next sort of 20 years. It's a massive, massive change. It's got to be some huge shifts. And most of the conversation seems to be about how you're going to make your margin this month. What's your quarterly numbers? No one's having this big conversation. So I started Lightswitch to start that process in a small way by supporting local producers and helping them become better food producers and become more viable businesses across ANZ. Since then, it's expanded a little bit. As I've sort of brought the team on, we've started to understand that we need to focus a little bit more on culture and actually building better food organisations from the ground up. So not just giving them better commercial tools, but actually building stronger cultures that will enable them to be more successful over a period of time. I think if I have to boil it down to one word, it's help. How do we help people? And that's probably the most important thing. The food organisations in this country need help, and we can help. If you don't need our help, then that's great, fantastic. We'll introduce you to people who do need the help that you want if we know them. But generally, if we can help and we can find a way to make it work, then that's what we try and do, and that's a really worthwhile thing to do, I think. Great,
that seems very authentic. I like that. Okay, so let's move into the next section, which is around advice you would give others, and given your experience, Andrew. So from your perspective, you meet lots of people and have in your corporate life or in your career as a consultant. Some who are maximising their potential, and you think great, and others who aren't. And obviously, one of the reasons I put this together and run my business is I think we could all do a better job around maximizing potential. But for your perspective, what makes the difference? Why do some realize their potential and some don't?
I think there's so many reasons why people don't grow. And it's really interesting because some people keep growing their whole life and some people just sort of stop. They get to 35 or 40 and they just don't seem to get past whatever roadblock it is that's stopping them grow. Sometimes I think it's a conscious decision, sometimes it's unconscious, but it's not just about work. I think what happens is the reason that you sort of get stuck in your career isn't necessarily about your career. It's probably about some other stuff that's going on in your life. If you think back to that Covey roles discussion, all the other things that you're doing in your life at the moment are probably impacting your ability to grow in your career. I think fear is also a big one. A lot of people are afraid of moving away from what they know for a couple of different reasons. It's partly about cash, and it's partly about ego, and it's partly about taking on something new. I think there's been a couple of people who have mentioned in this podcast about curiosity. Curiosity is a fantastic thing, and so is boldness. If you're curious about something and you start something, it's amazing how the world jumps in behind you and gives you a lift. But if you sit there and you're stuck and you're sort of ruminating on the fact that, I don't seem to be going anywhere and I don't like my job and I can't see my way forward and I don't think my boss is right and I don't think the company's, supporting me, you tend to get caught in this echo chamber of negativeness and everything just stops and you don't move forward. A lot of people have talked about taking responsibility for your own career, and I cannot say how much I agree with that. That is such the most important thing. As soon as you realize that you're taking responsibility for your own career and it's up to you to actually get it done, then that's the biggest step forward that you can take.
Yeah. Yes, because it's not going to happen for you. Sometimes it will. Sometimes you get lucky and you land on your feet, but they also continually land on their feet are those who think it through and plan and take control and are proactive. Absolutely, for sure. And then we often hear advice that your early career is about trying lots of different things. Before you find your true pathway. I'm not sure it's just early career. I think it could go on for further, but in your experience, is that true? And in practical terms, what does that mean, do you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's two things I think about. First of all, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you start working at 25, let's say you finish university at 22, you're going to have a couple of years off buggering around with a backpack, and you figure out finally what you want to do at 25 and you start a career. It's reasonable to expect you're going to be working at 65, probably even 70. I think the life expectancy of most people starting in the workforce these days is about 110. So, if you pull out at 65, that's a lot of time where you're not going to be doing very much. A lot of super, you might be working a bit longer. So
that's a worry. Retirement at 75, okay.
So you're going to be on a 40 or 50-year career. And I remember when Olivia and I got together, we sat down and wrote a 20-year plan, which sounds incredibly naff, but that was probably the best thing we did. And I could honestly say, write a plan about what you want it to be. It doesn't have to be massively detailed, but literally, right, 25, I want to do this, I want to focus on this the next 5 years, and I want to get married, and I want to have a couple of kids, and I want to live here, and I want to do this, and because what that actually does, once you've got that plan together, it allows you to build a career which matches your life plan. So you don't sort of get to this point where you're in your early 30s, you've got an absolute kick-ass job that's, you need to put 60 hours a week into, but you've also got 2 young kids at home and you're on half the income and your family's falling apart because you're never there, right? So try and think about it in terms of a longer term, not just where you're going for the next 6 months, not just the next review. It's actually this long stretch. And that can also take some of the urgency out of it, because you don't need to get the next promotion in the next 6 months. What happens if it's a year and a half away? It doesn't really matter over a 45-year period. Who cares? Relax, enjoy it. Enjoy the people around you. Build really good relationships and have fun. The best teams I've worked with are the ones where we've had fun and we've had a really good team of people. And when you do that, you get the best results. But if you're too cranked up trying to grab the next promotion for whatever reason, it's not going to work. It doesn't work if you force it. You just need to take the foot off the gas and understand that it's the longer play. The second thing is go wide before going up. You need to build a solid foundation, because when you lead, you need to succeed. If you're in a leadership position and you're leading teams, then you need to know what you're doing. And having that broad experience gives you insight, it gives you perspective, and it allows you to act with empathy. And those are three critical things that you need to be a leader. And the more experience you've got from different positions in an organization, the better a leader you're going to be. If you're at a position where you're an MD and you're sitting around a table and you've got a sales director, a marketing director, supply chain director, finance director, innovation director, it's really helpful if you've worked in at least 2 or 3 of those departments, because you know how they work. If you've just come up through the sales line, you've got a natural affinity with the sales guy, and everybody else is just there to make better sales. But that's actually not the way it works, right? So you need to. So having that level of experience allows you to be a better leader. It helps you make better decisions. It creates gut feel, and a lot of big decisions are made on gut feel, because the data won't guide you. It'll tell you what you should do, but you know that you can't do it because you don't have unlimited amounts of cash, and the retailers won't take price increases. So you actually end up making gut feel decisions. And when you've got that breadth of experience, it helps your gut feel be better. So yes, go wide before you go up.
Fantastic.
And volunteer, put your hand up, try different stuff. Best gig I ever did, I put my hand up when Costco came, when I was working at PepsiCo for Smiths, Costco launched in the country. I put my hand up and said, I want to be the national account manager. And they all looked at me and said, are you crazy? It's one store. Why would you want to do that? But I learned so much by working on that particular customer and working with the business to try and get that product on shelf, which we did successfully, and it worked really well. And that was one of the best experiences of my career, and working on customers. It was fantastic.
Fantastic. It chimes a little bit what I was chatting about with Jeff a couple of weeks ago, Jeff McKenzie, who's on the last pod, guys. Similar advice, but different perspective. But I think the smartest people in terms of those who are managing their careers now aren't just racing up as fast as they can go. It used to be a case of you set, when I was kind of coming up, you measured yourself by your peers, who reached what role at what age, and who was earning what income, and you burn out so fast doing that, not just emotionally and physically and all that kind of stuff, but actually your career burns out too quickly because you're not gathering the experiences that's going to enable you to be competitive for more senior roles. So those who are taking their time, seeking new experiences, volunteering almost, as you put it, trying new things, and not being obsessed about earning an extra 5 or 10 grand this year, are going to earn a hell of a lot more over all of their career, because they're going to reach more senior levels and be in those senior levels for much longer, or they're going to gather experiences to become a consultant. And we've just discovered today what an interesting pathway that can be, and I hope you've inspired a few people today, and given a reality check as well in terms of the reasons why to do it, Andrew, because really enjoyable conversation. That we are pretty much out of time, so but we covered a lot, and I think it's given everybody a very different point of view in terms of the sessions we've run so far. For those of you who've not have jumped on for the first time today, or perhaps are new, there is over 40 of the sessions we've run over the last couple of years, all available on the Your Future in Sales and Marketing podcast on Spotify, Google, or Apple. And next up, we've got Yvette Cossey, who is the recently appointed CMO of Bloom's The Chemist, and also a council member of the Marketing Academy. Now, Yvette I've known for a while, and she has a sibling who's also a CMO out there, Saharj, who works at Numi. Now, Yvette wrote a cracking article for CMO magazine called Hire the Outsider, which is all about why do companies just stick in their lane when they recruit talent? Now, that's music to my ears, and I noticed a bunch of recruiters commented on a LinkedIn post that said, "Oh, I wish that was the reality," and pointed to examples of companies doing it well, but it's not the majority. But I really want to get into that debate with Yvette. That will be on May the 12th, if you'd like to join the live session. So really looking forward to that. Now, also just from an AXR perspective, before we conclude, if you've not requested your copy yet for the AXR 2022 salary guides, we have them for sales, marketing, and category and insights. All the salaries, all the roles, all the trends within the roles, your must-have career document for 2022. Get in touch with us, and we'll send you and take you through what's happening in the market. But that was awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Really good conversation today. Loved your insights, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, Mike. Always great to catch up. Always enjoy chat.
Fantastic. Everybody have a great day. See you in a couple of weeks' time.